Oh, shit, again. The girl cursed everyone, running away from the residents of Konohagakure no Sato, who once again decided to mock the child, perhaps thus taking out her anger on the fragile body of an innocent girl. So, now around the corner, she thought fitfully, but was brazenly interrupted by her personal advisor. Then to the fourth board to the left of the tree, said the fox from the subconscious, having made a mental decree. She pushed aside the right board and rolled out into the neglected courtyard. Clinging to the board and listening to the sounds, she realized that she was relatively safe and almost unharmed. Well, is it really a great catastrophe? Disheveled hair and a slightly injured knee? Hey! I could have done it myself. Mentally exclaimed the little girl, adjusting the golden tails on her head. Yes, but hurry up. Even though I promise training, I can change my mind, the fox said importantly, growling out consonants. Now, I'm just going to get confused. And go home first, eat and change clothes, the fox also added. The care that slipped through surprised him pretty much, but he just waved it off. If it were an ordinary vessel, the nine-tailed one would not bother to communicate with a child, even if not stupid, but still a child. However, this Jinchuriki definitely deserved Biju's close attention. Carelessly reflected on the thought link, to which the fox only rolled his eyes. He did not like such carelessness of the pupil. The little girl adjusted her orange hat and went home as quickly as possible, bypassing the residents along the way so as not to run into a bad attitude towards herself, whether it was screams or a full-fledged beating. Naruko was often chased and she did not always manage to successfully avoid a collision, but that was earlier, a year ago. A year of old life. Flashback. Naruko ran into drunken, and therefore even more aggressive villagers, ninjas, by the way, which does not add a drop of respect or empathy to them in the eyes of a small child. If she were not so bright, in many ways for some reason enduring all these blows, sometimes without even making a sound, just swallowing offensive tears, thinking only, for what? She ran away to avoid the pain. Quickly, through the crowds, through the bushes, sometimes tearing his knees, falling, tripping over a stone or someone's footboard. Only today, it seems, none of her tricks have passed, so, now around the corner but they didn't let the girl think. The residents grabbed Naruko by the collar, lifting him off the ground, and after one of them hit him in the stomach, and the second one let go of his hands, allowing the child to slip out of the grip. She fell, noticeably applying her chest, so much so that the air came out wheezing from her lungs, and her ribs were pierced with burning pain, but they did not let her get up. They began to beat her with their feet from the heart. The blow and the ribs cracked, the blow and the nose bled. A blow to the head and darkness. Naruko's POV. I woke up in a dark corridor full of water whose level reached my knee. There was no way out, there was only water around. It was scary to peer into the darkness. Then I decided to wander through the corridors, hoping to wander somewhere. Is this a dream? Or am I dead? It was difficult to walk, but soon I came out into a huge room, at the end of which there was a cage with golden bars, high, so that the end of the lattice was not visible. In the middle of it, most likely, there was a strange piece of paper covered with some drawings that I just remembered now. I need to fix my hat. I looked into the water and was surprised. My tail came out here. I hid it. Mentally gave the command, hide, but the tail did not disappear. Okay, let's leave it like that. There seems to be no one around. For lack of ideas, and also because it's boring to stand, I went to the cage. Nothing happened for a while, but a big fox face appeared from behind the bars. She looked around meticulously and fixed her gaze on me. Her thoughtful expression was replaced by an unkind, but caustic grin. A paw abruptly stretched out and grabbed me. The muzzle approached, but could not overcome the bars, which gave me some courage. Hey! Let me go! You red rug! I screamed, and the fox laughed loudly and took off my hat, poking it with a sharp claw, while I convulsively held my breath, afraid of losing my head. My ears appeared. Since birth, as I found out in the library, I am a kitsune, half human, which, unfortunately, did not help me find out why I had them. What are you doing here, little kitsune? Are you my Jinchuriki? The fox growled loudly, clearly not afraid that I might be uncomfortable. And who are the Jinchuriki? I asked, interested. Sit down, I'll tell you. End of flashback. From this conversation, I became friends with him, because we began to communicate endlessly inside the subconscious, and then by thought communication. I quickly got used to it, and I can't even imagine now that he didn't advise or grumble something before, watching my actions from the inside. I do not know if he considers me his friend, but I hope that he will never, ever leave me. Going into my little hut, I went to the mirror that hung right on the old closet. It was full length, but designed for an adult. A 5-year-old disheveled girl was looking at me from the reflection. Blue eyes, golden well-groomed hair tied in 2 ponytails, falling on his chest. Well, what's not a beauty? But everyone sees only the demon. I, having seen enough of my beloved, went to the refrigerator, finding cold already brewed noodles inside. This will be my lunch, kurama, and that's my biju's name, which lives somewhere between the stomach and the rectum, has been talking about this special workout for a week. At the age of 5, I already know the entire genin base. Well, as I know, I'm learning and mastering, but I'm still the strongest and most agile, of course. I was trained by Ku. Well, let's see what kind of training will be. Hurry up. Stop eating already. The fox grumbled. You didn't even let me finish my ramen. Fiend. Ramen is sacred. I exclaimed at this bastard, without ceasing to work with chopsticks, loudly squelching noodles that had already begun to cool down, which had previously been practically rebrewed and in fact resurrected in the name of consumption. Come on now. Do you want to get out of this bedbug and get stronger or get fat? Kurama growled again, even knocking on the bars of the cage from the fulfilled feelings, which rattled disgustingly, leaving a ringing roar in my head, which may later give me a bad headache. I don't like it when he does this, but still my body and mind mate can be hot-tempered when it comes to my body and training. He needs a strong and long-lived vessel. Well, he values me, of course. That I put aside the half-eaten ramen, after sending the dishes to the sink, began to change clothes. Going to the closet, I thought about what I should put on myself, so that it would be comfortable in training and not too shabby, which were essentially many of my outfits, especially since I lived in a shelter in my infancy. What should I wear? I asked into the void, obviously threatening with my loud voice to convince the neighbors of my inadequacy, because I'm talking to myself, neglecting thought communication. Oh, no. The eternal problem of girls of all ages. The fox howled from the subconscious, anticipating the hours of picking up clothes. That's how unlucky he was, all the vessels and all the girls. Shut up, I think, I replied, looking at the clothes that were hanging on hangers in the closet. There were only 4 outfits. You can't walk around on the living wage of an orphan. Having found the right one, as well as the most presentable in appearance, I began to change into an orange t-shirt with purple snake inserts on the sides and knee-length black breeches. Then I went to the exit for black ninja boots, the indispensable shoes of all shinobi. After leaving the apartment, I headed to my favorite training ground. It was empty because of the proximity of the Uchi quarter. People were afraid of the proximity of a powerful clan, and the fact that their techniques would be stolen in vain by Uchiha, known for their miracle eyes, capable of stealing many techniques, not based, of course, on genetics and contracts. There were probably a few more exceptions, but they were in no hurry to expand on this, preferring only to remain mysteriously silent with stone-faced, which is very much in their spirit. But I would hardly have thought about it if Kurama hadn't bothered me. We have nothing to hide with training. This is generally a genin and academic base. Moreover, the Uchiha do not train at the training ground, they do it in the quarter. Here the polygon is free. When I reached the training ground, I decided to ask Kurama what kind of event it would be, which he had been scaring me with for almost a month. Kurama, what kind of special training? Warming up and stretching a little, I said. Explain. Does the chakra conducting paper mean anything to you? Put a chakra in the paper, the fox replied, grinning maliciously somewhere in his own red fur. That's an ulcer. I squeezed the piece of paper that was in my pouch between my palms and let the chakra into the paper. She was cut in half. Well, what does that mean? I grumbled, scattering the remains of the leaves around the landfill, walking slowly while I was conducting a mental dialogue. They have interpretations, they are called spontaneous for a reason. I immediately smiled, thoughtfully squinting towards the fishing line, from where the amazing sounds came. I hope it will be water. It means that you have the wind element. Understand? Biju announced solemnly, waving his tails with pride and presenting himself to all 4 relatives. And that's the whole training? It didn't fit in my head that this is what they dragged me here for. That's why I dragged myself here today, yes. But I decided that you need to study Fuin, also starting to develop channels for a close acquaintance with your own element. Now your body may not withstand the load. The 9-tailed man strenuously explained the basic truths. You are Uzumaki, you have an innate understanding of it. But I don't know Fuin. Therefore, from today you are looking for the library and the Uzumaki temple. There is most likely a barrier passing through the blood. And Fuin's masters have almost all died out. Understand, little Kitsune? The monster explained this, enjoying the upcoming course of my training. I frowned at first, though. Now I have a task. We'll search, or I'll never get out of here. I've been looking for these damn ruins for a week now. I climbed Konoha along, across, vertically, horizontally and even diagonally, but I never went to this stupid library. Maybe this is a training session that my lodger arranged? Then I failed it. Only on the 3rd day of the search I managed to accidentally find the temple, but there was nothing interesting there, only an underground passage with ancient masks, 5 to 6 of which were missing. Some places were empty. But I never found the library. And on the 7th day, I asked the sleeping Ku for advice. Hey! Help me, finally. Sadly and tragically, having overcome my pride, I asked in a broken voice. Admitting defeat was difficult. Can't you find this stupid library? Have you looked at your clan in the quarter? Fall into the fog. I'm going to sleep. The fox grumbled and fell asleep again, whiling away the time of my search. Impudent red rug. I answered him and went to continue the search. Well, in truth, I stepped on something. It was logical to look for the Uzumaki clan library in their own quarter. The only problem was, everything was destroyed there, and I am afraid of getting any injuries, making my way through the fragile ruins at my own risk. And after all, if I really stumble and, let's say, fall somewhere where I can't get out, no one will save me. Who needs me, except for the top, and then, not as a ninja or a person, but as a weapon. Even if they missed me in 3 days, it's good. Not for nothing after the beatings, I could have been lying in a ditch or bushes for several days until everything healed. Putting aside heavy thoughts, I went on to wind through the noisy streets of Konoha, going as quickly and safely as possible to get to the ruins according to the instructions of the fox that bothered to mumble an approximate path. Haha. Well, my ancestors are also prudent. There was a barrier that let me through. It looks like he has weakened a lot over the years and has not been fueled by the chakra. Or he only skips Uzumaki, I do not know. She opened her mouth in admiration. Despite the years, many buildings were perfectly preserved and admired for their beauty. Carved window shutters, all kinds of reliefs. True, the gardens were neglected, but this only decorated the fancy houses. Many houses are overgrown with dense vegetation and vines entwining the walls. I was looking at the whole gamut of beauty when I heard a cry and an urgent murmur. I started to turn my head, looking for a place to hide. They may start asking what I'm doing here, but I still decided not to run, but to pretend to fall. I screamed myself and fell for effect. Soon 2 dark-haired men came out to me. One was older and carried a small one on his back. He came up, I dusted myself off and was getting ready to run, but he asked, "Are you hurt?" "No," I answered automatically. "What's your name?" the little one asked. He was about the same as me, but for myself I will call him Small D, Naruto Uzumaki. "And I will become Hokage," I said, holding my disguise. I quickly broke into the forest, which I didn't notice at first. They didn't catch up with me, they have their own problems too. Meanwhile, I was making my way through the forest. It was damp there, and there was a lot of thick long grass growing. I didn't even notice how I fell through somewhere. It turned out to be a musty room with leaves that had already withered and were ready to become fertilizers, and because of this there was a terrible stench. I looked around, but realized that it was pitch dark here, only a ray of light from where I had flown illuminated me. I began to fumble with my hand in search of a stick to detect the road, as the blind did. But there was nothing there, so I decided to grope my way. I walked a few steps, and the room began to narrow suspiciously. I started walking forward with my arms outstretched. A little later they began to rest against the wall. I kept going until I hit a wall. Dead end. Something hissed in the corner. A second later, I felt something crawling up my leg, not going to stop. When it reached the shoulder, it crawled along the arm. The snake wrapped itself a little above the wrist and hissed. I started walking there, into the light to see the snake. When I came out, I saw a small yellow snake. She hissed and jerked her head up. I looked up, but I didn't notice anything new. The exit was too high. But the snake jerked its head up again. "Kurama, what should I do? What kind of snake is that?" I rattled off, "Climb up. I can reassure you, she is not called," he grinned, and I, directing the chakra to my feet, ran along the wall, although I did not take more than 2 steps. But it was enough for me, and I clung to the edges of the recess and pulled myself up. When I climbed to the surface, the snake slid and crawled away into the bushes that I stood up and dusted myself off. Having done that, I looked around. What I saw caused me complete bewilderment. I was surrounded, but not by people, but by animals. My clearing was surrounded by hedgehogs, wolves, squirrels and other forest animals, led by a big fox and that snake. The fox came up to me. I decided to give him my hand. He sniffed her, turned around and walked away, but looked back and shook his head, saying, "Follow me." Well, what about me? And I'm nothing. I followed him. Suddenly something will show. To my delight and surprise, he took me to the path and led me deep into the universe. When we finally got there, I wasn't exhausted. This ginger led me to a strange edge. It went like a circular staircase. The circular clearing was divided, it was uneven and looked like this. The first circle is the edge of the clearing, the second circle is smaller and a few centimeters lower, and so they made a round funnel. And in the middle of the last circle there was a stone, all overgrown with moss. All this edge and tiers were covered with it and rare grass. The fox came up, sat down near the stone and patted his tail next to it, saying, "Sit down, don't be shy." I sat down by the stone and closed my eyes like a fox, meditating. A few minutes later, at the behest of my heart and a priest looking for adventure, I put my hand on the ground. You can't imagine, but I felt like I could see the earth with my eyes closed. I felt and saw, true, everything was gray with blurry contours, everything. How the animals that surrounded the edge of the forest stand, how the wolf cub sneezed, how the butterfly flutters and the bird takes off. And it's all in slow motion and with your eyes closed. When I opened my eyes, everything was gone. The fox barked something, but I understood it all. Do you understand me? He asked it. Why yes, I stammered, stunned. You smell weird, you're special. You're a kitsune. You are the new keeper of the forest. The fox said solemnly, and the snake nodded its head. What is it? A special child is born every few years. He becomes a semi-beast. Regardless of who it is, an ordinary child of a civilian, ninja, daimyo or officials. He can listen to the forest, see it, help and understand the forest, talk to it. You are a kitsune, therefore, the guardian of the forest. We'll teach you. End POV. Naruto was stunned, but agreed, appreciating all the benefits of this offer, and in general, the animals were cute, but surprisingly turned out to be strict teachers that enthusiastically set about teaching the little girl, trying to interest her in the area studied, and instill useful skills and abilities that will help her in her later life. The time for forest lessons passed quickly. Autumn came imperceptibly, followed by winter, because many of her animals left, falling into a long hibernation for a period, even if not so cold in the land of fire of winter, but still as lifeless and naked as ever. Naruto, with interest and natural curiosity, learned more and more about the forest, as well as its inhabitants and their cunning wisdom, which allowed them to live in the forest for generations, freely taking what is necessary in nature, in return helping in their own way, bringing all the care to their home and breadwinner. The inhabitants of the forest were first taught to listen to the forest and the animals inhabiting it in a huge variety, so at first she helped the animals, raised the young, monitored their well-being. Then to understand the forest, so she walked, listened and sniffed. From this course, she was taught to predict the weather and determine the direction by special signs. They taught the sides of the horizon and the geography that the birds told. Then the animals told the girl how important it is to keep and protect the gifts of nature, as well as learn to accept her offerings that help us to live on. She spent the whole day in the forest. So Naruto trained. They also taught her to take her second form, a fox. And she trained for the first week only to run and jump in this form. There were many successes, but there were also failures. For example, one day she was learning to run in her new form, trying not to confuse her limbs and get used to the new one, the tail, and accidentally fell into an anthill. Then she also learned how forest animals are treated. So first aid, botany and medicine were added to all this. Like that. Well, tomorrow she goes to the Academy of Young Killers. Naruto's POV. What is all this for? Why am I still training? Why? Why don't I give up everything and build a temple of ramen worship, the temple of ramen worship? Stop dealing with philosophical questions and filling your head with nonsense. Q's voice seemed to me like a thunderclap. I want and philosophize. I answered brazenly and loudly. That's disgusting. I can't do anything. After all, I'm an idiot. And sometimes, to the ridicule and notation of teachers, I want to portray a face with a brick and sit like this little one, whom I saw with his brother. The uchi always have such a face, and the fuck knows what's on their mind. That's because they have a life. I want the same. You have to keep such a face for now. Q provided me with a well-known fact. And after all, the red muzzle is grinning impudently. Unfortunately, of course, exclusively for me, Kurama can read my thoughts. He suddenly remembered some technique from a century ago, if not earlier, so he reads me like an open book, giggling nastily. And I'm not doing anything, I'm, in general, just God's dandelion. He sang melodiously, and how did he do it with such a set of growling sounds? Kurama, maliciously flashing a grin and waving his tail in contentment, inadvertently stirring up the water in the subconscious and creating a terrifying roar, as always. Someday from such sounds in the skull, I will definitely go deaf. You I repeat. Are you God's dandelion? I would rather believe that Irika will become a blonde, put on a pink dress and go to Sunu to sell dyed blue tangerines. I pouted, completely forgetting about the lesson. I had already completely lost the thread of the teacher's speeches that I had been crucifying for a good half hour in a row. Ha 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 ha. Well, you give. Irika, ha ha, blonde. Ha 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 ha. My skull, and the thing that is commonly called the brain, is about to fall apart from such a loud laugh issued by a fox. Okay, figs with him, let's leave Kurama to whoop, but for now I'll tell you what happened this year. Yes, it's been a whole year. But nothing out of the ordinary happened, the usual boring days filled with lessons from animals we collect, and after sorting through herbs, reading some scrolls and books that were taken either from an ordinary library or that were dragged by a fox, it's not really known from where. And, what was expected, brain wear and grumbling from a personal almost pocket bijou. You know, in the forest, when I was studying, little foxes and other animals were told a fairy tale about the great Uaa. Scared? But I don't. And now he says he's great. And I am the greatest and the most terrible, you? I am great and unique, and you are a small bug. Ha ha ha. And the fox's sinister laugh sounded. Okay, let him laugh. Well, I'll see what Irika is doing. I just open my eyes, and a chalk flies right into my forehead. I screamed on purpose, I answer you on purpose, and, unable to stay on the chair, fell down with a loud laugh and a crash along with the unfortunate furniture. Rubbing my bruised head, I got up and waited for moralizing and reproaches from the teacher about my carelessness and neglectful attitude to study. The scream did not take long to wait. Irika-sensei began to hang noodles on my ears about the will of fire, about the fact that I would not become a ninja and blah blah blah. On the fact that I won't become a ninja, as usual, I was talking nonsense about how cool I am, and that I would become the very first female hokage. But in the end I forgot what I was saying and decided to jump out of the window like an idiot and get away from an angry teacher. Now we'll get away. And here it is not. Irika leaned over the windowsill and pulled me out, who had not managed to get out of the nearest bushes properly, which softened my fate, caught me by the collar and dragged me back to the academy to the class that was animated by my antics, which watched my performance with laughter. The teacher decided, after another act of violence against my brain, to plant me with Uchiha in the hope that I would look at him with heart-shaped eyes and at least not interfere with my lessons. Naive. I will never love Uchiha for any buns. Loudly banging my bag of accessories on the desk, I dragged the necessary things from my place, brazenly sprawled on the desk under the very private gaze of Uchiha and tried to fall asleep quickly. It turned out successfully. I fell into a dream where I saw my happy life outside of my beloved Konoha. For some reason, little animals sang and jumped in my dream. Irika danced with blue tangerines together with Uchiha, who blew me kisses, and all this under the ominous laughter of Kurama, who was clearly satisfied with the whole current performance. You know, I always thought there were no more boring lessons than Irika's. But the impossible is possible. Take it, Naruto. It's worse. Irika is much better. But what do you think happened? We were separated. Girls and boys. I haven't seen such lessons. How can we, the future, after all, ninjas look at a dried broom and create an ikebana? They also indulged in philosophical discussions about what beauty, harmony, and life are. But why do we need to know how to grow bonsai? Like, if you don't become a ninja, will you grow bonsai and sell it? This is terrible. I couldn't do it anymore. I ran away to the boys. After what I told them, those with whom I got along more or less decided to cover for me. They were Shikamaru, Kiba, and Choji. Kiba bullied me all the time, bothered me and received punches from me for it. The sloth and the fat man were always for the campaign, they supported any idea, just not to fall asleep with a baby's sleep in the classroom. We spent a lot of time together both during classes, exchanging notes and playing during breaks, and after, hanging out periodically on the playgrounds. At times, it was difficult to get rid of them to go to forest exercises, especially from Kiba, who sometimes infuriated to white heat, forcing them to start a fight. And I fought like an angry cat, scratching, biting, when the techniques were over and there were those that would be too pale to apply. So I had to lose, allowing myself to be twisted into a mudden rock. However, after that, the dog lover felt some kind of guilt, and I became the happy owner of a whole plate of ramen or dango. Of the girls, I only made friends with the shy Hinata, and then we went to this for quite a long time, since she stuttered banally in the presence of someone else, becoming even quieter than usual. There are always a lot of people at the academy, which prevented our close contact and the establishment of relations. After a while, when I was convinced that she was a reliable person, I revealed the secret of the years. Hinata reacted calmly, she said that it was even cute, but strange. And after another 6 months, I started helping her with training and revealed the face of a trained, slightly stupid, not treated, but excellent kunoichi. And now, after our joint training, I'm persuading her to go to the ramen room. Well, please. Well, Hinata, sweet, beautiful, the most. Well, let's go. No, I'm not going. Last time you shoved 3 whole servings into me. Funny frowning, grumbled Hyuga, twisting a strand on her finger. We left the training ground, there was not a soul in it, which allowed her to be bolder. But, and it's time for me to go home. Well, bye, she ran off to the block, and I went home. I think you think that with Kurama? He's on strike. That I'm exploiting him, poor man. And I took, although I rather announced, a vacation. And he ordered to remake the subconscious, for which I began with enthusiasm, starting a major overhaul in my own head, thanks to which I learned a lot of new and interesting words. I decided to rebuild everything the old-fashioned way and presented bricks, rollers, wallpaper, paints, whitewash. And so I decided to put columns of imaginary white marble with silver veins instead of the bars of the cage. And I started thinking about how to move them there. I decided to do it this way, I came up with and presented a large cart, moved the column into it. I created it so that there was a slope at the cage and kicked the column to ride. She quickly slid down and crashed into one of the bars. But the column began to fall and filled up an unreliable rod. He fell on the tail of a sleeping fox. I've heard so many new words. QB said that these were bad words and started yelling at me. But I decided to try calling him the same words. When I started to repeat it, his eyes became the size of 2 hemispheres. That was cool. But soon I finished the repair. And instead of bars there were columns, and in the cage there was a bunch of red, green and other colors of pillows. On the left wall I put a bookcase with books, these books are all my knowledge for these almost 8 years. On the right, an aquarium with imaginary fish. It is not necessary to feed them, but it causes a sense of responsibility, even if only for the fish. Well, a week of exercises or, better to say, torment has passed since that moment. We were taught to throw kunai, taijutsu and substitution techniques. Nothing interesting. Sad. Well, now I was heading into the woods. When I entered the familiar clearing, I found no one. Scary. I decided to scan the area. I touched the ground with my hand, closed my eyes and felt the animals rushing around in a hurry, running disorientated, sometimes colliding with each other. There was no discernment in this pile, where whose body, whose tail. All this panic was terrifying, because my teachers, who taught me not to be afraid of the forest, were now trembling with horror themselves. Concentrating harder, I concentrated, when suddenly I felt tremors. It's an earthquake. It is necessary to find a hearth now. So, calm down. Calmly that I started checking the area, still being in an uncomfortable position, with my hands on the ground, so I sat on my knees and put both palms on the ground, closing my eyes again, plunged into a state close to meditation. The main difference was that I was tense to the limit, scanning the surrounding underground space. In such a simple way I can feel living objects, as well as movements, swaying so far within a small range of about 100 meters, if you take my body as the center of a circle. This worked in all planes, which were connected in one way or another with the soil. However, not that this, as you might think, is not a very useful ability, because in battle there will be no time to cuddle with the Mother Earth. However, if I can work it out properly by increasing its radius, then it can help in guard duty or reconnaissance, which is always useful, you never know. After a while, there was a jolt again, but much smaller, such that even the animals stopped worrying, only trembled and began to return to the postponed cases and rake new ones. The tremors are over. I scanned the area again and finally felt the hearth. But it seems to be over. I'm more sensitive than other people, so they probably almost didn't feel it. Everything worked out, and it pleases. It took me enough time to find the terrified forest dwellers. They looked depressed, they were still slightly twitching from sharp rustles, but most of them had already recovered and started work on restoring the crooked holes, sticks, branches and foliage attacked in some places. Somewhere a sandy embankment collapsed, fairly filling the entrances and exits to the houses. Some birds had twisted nests. One good thing that it's not the season and all the chicks have already left them and no one was injured. I was ready to become an assistant in the first rows, so I began to calm and encourage the animals in every possible way, to scare the young, some of whom, literally screaming, eating or whining seconds ago, had already played pranks, shaking the already spent nerves. Next came the repair of dwellings, which will take some time, both in search of material and in the process itself. While I was immersed in my work, there was something to think about. One of the events that excite me, which has not left my mind until now, is the liquidation of the Uchiha clan, which occurred about a year ago. Even sadder was the fact that it was done by the brother of my classmate from the academy, Sasuke, the dreams of all the girls, and that little kid who hurt his leg when I was looking for the Uzumaki library. It was unrealistically sad for me to see how he closes himself in, ceases to mess with almost everyone, completely immersing himself in his studies. At least there was a plus in this, trying to lighten his soul with training. He gained experience and now he could put everyone from our class on the shoulder blades, even Kibu, who repeatedly won many sparrings. Completely preoccupied with work and my own thoughts, I almost screamed when I heard a sharp crunch behind my back. Turning half around, Sasuke himself appeared in front of me. Was he watching me? But I only felt him now. I'm an idiot, because someone who wants to harm me could have done the same. What if it was an enemy? From the shock and comicality of the situation, I froze, as I was, in a not very successful position. I was sitting on my knees, there was a squirrel on my shoulder, a jay on my head, and on the right a family of hedgehogs, to which I was repairing a mink. "What are you doing here?" I exclaimed and jerked my head. The jay flew up a little bit, and then sat on my head again, continuing to brush the feathers with its beak, and then chirped briefly. "Echem. I came to the training ground to train," he replied, frowning. Folding his arms on his chest, he began to look around, diligently pretending not to notice me, but those honeysuckle bushes are much more interesting. As you can see, he's not here. This is my clearing. You've already passed your training ground, he chuckled and came up to me, looking down. I raised my head and met his gaze. Get lost. Perish the evil spirit. Get lost, I waved my hands, and he, with another chuckle, left. Freaking out, as luck would have it, I remembered that I never found the library, as Kurama ordered. So busy that I forgot about the ancestral heritage, scrolls and seals. Probably, if my parents were alive, they would have called me a clumsy and careless daughter. I wonder if they would be happy with what I'm doing now. With indefatigable thoughts, I finished the burrow to the family of hedgehogs, and they thanked me and quickly trotted inside. Without getting up, I scanned the area again, finding landmarks. I moved to the place where I met a white snake by falling. When I crashed there, I didn't examine this strange thing. Moving through the thicket, pushing aside branches and bushes, I went to that place, but I didn't even need to scan the area again, without looking, I crashed there. With a wild cry, I plopped down on the dry leaves and heard someone's excited cry, "Naruto." There was a rustle, a rasp, and then a sharp crash, and something fell on top of me, crushing my body with its weight, and so sprawled on the forest debris in a not too comfortable position, face to the floor, back to the stars. I strangely, even for myself, either grunted or squeaked, got out from under someone and looked around. Uchiha. He hurriedly jumped up, carefully tried to shake off the stuck leaves, but gave up this idea quickly, realizing that it would still go to the Strurka. Looking around, asked HM. "And why did you come here?" He looked around suspiciously, and then turned to me again. "It doesn't look like a playground." He smiled caustically and took some twig from my hair, pulling out a couple of hairs inadvertently. I didn't go anywhere. I accidentally fell here. I, pouting, turned away and closed my eyes, putting my hand to the floor, as it were. But Sasuke pulled me away by the hand. I turned around with displeasure, stared at the Uchiha, who was dissatisfied with ignoring himself. He was grinning with his hands on his hips. He gave me his hand. I looked at her and accepted her incredulously. "I'll give you a lift, and you'll get out and pull me out." With these words, Uchiha looked at the opening from which we alternately fell, clearly thinking how to pull it off. "What? No. Never." "And then what?" the brunette asked skeptically, crossing his arms. On the other hand, no one asked him to follow me. "That's right, a lifeguard has been found." I reluctantly nodded, came up behind him, jumped up and sat on his back, wrapping my legs around him. He grabbed my sides, and I, finding a way out, pulled myself up. I hunched over, slightly grazing the skin on my palms and elbows, and gave him my hand. The brunette turned out to be heavy, but I pulled him out. I quietly said thank you and ran away, blushing that I woke up in a good mood. I have a lot of things to do today. Jumping out of bed, I ran to cook myself something delicious for breakfast. Glancing briefly at the clock, she grinned contentedly. "I won't be late today." Breaking off the eggs in the bedlam, I went to look for a frying pan. "Well, you can eat that too, right?" I didn't cook much, disappearing in training and eating ramen. So, sometimes I could cook something simple for my birthday, or just if I had to. But now I'm going to eat right, otherwise I'm too small for my age. After pouring oil into a frying pan and breaking an egg, I also managed to pour myself tea, and when everything was ready, I took a plate and put the slightly burnt scrambled eggs on it. After trying it, I was convinced that it could be eaten. After eating, I went to get dressed. What to choose? Oh, I found it. I decided on this outfit: an orange hat on my head, a light blue t-shirt went down to the waist, an orange jacket was thrown over it, ordinary sandals and black breeches were on my feet. I wonder if I'll surprise everyone. I usually wear an orange hat, a white t-shirt and blue shorts. Okay, it's time. Half an hour later I was at the academy and Epic went to class. There were 10 minutes left, so many were already in place. I walk in and the conversations stop. I pass and sit down in my place, namely at the last desk. Oh, it's not good. The Uchiha fan club is coming to me. What, stupid, decided to dress up. You won't get any prettier anyway. Ugly. The club screamed in agreement, and I started to swing the rights and also call names. It almost came to a fight. Fortunately, Irika showed up in time and separated everyone. And accused me. I was pumping my license for another 20 minutes. As a result, she was punished. There is no justice in life. I spent all the remaining classes depressed. The debut failed. Not only was I bullied by the girls from the Uchiha fan club, but also my friends did not appreciate my updated outfit. I mostly grew out of all the others. Both Choji and Shikamaru reacted with short shrugs. They didn't care how I looked, and they also hardly understood the value of these things for me. I was malnourished for several weeks to buy it, and the seller, who turned out not to be my fan, also raised the price. I've realized in my life that arguing is more expensive for myself. Maybe I can just throw him out and no one will blame him for it anyway. Kiba's reaction at the same time made me want to hug him and hit him. He called me an orange monster and that only a person like me would manage to combine incongruous things like my t-shirt and a trigger. Not being patient with such a compliment, I still slapped him on the back of the head, and after that we all played together during the break. We hardly communicated with Hinata at the academy. The building was packed with ninjas and their offspring, so someone could easily tell Hinata's father that his daughter was hanging out with a monster. Therefore, we mainly communicated only at joint trainings, which her father did not know about. It would be more accurate to say that he thinks his daughter trains under the supervision of a teacher. She never stood up for me, rather I always protected her, saving her from bullies several times. And she, with gratitude, dragged me goodies from home. I went home in the most terrible mood. As Ku would say, Ravim. That's right, Ku. I haven't visited him for a long time. When she got home, she collapsed on the bed in her clothes, plunged into the subconscious. I didn't expect that. I expected to see marble columns and the works of my repair, but not this. There was sand under my feet, and the sun was shining in the sky. Instead of marble columns, giant palm trees with seals and a chaise longue with Kurama standing with his back to me, and there the sea splashes in front of him. My labors are in vain. And a mountain of unprintable words. Come on, that's even better. He said, and at the behest of his hand, another chaise longue appeared. I crouched down, growling. You won't get a tan right there anyway, I said, and collapsed on the household item. It would be better to do something useful. For example, he taught me something. By the way, why did I check my element for a long time then? I have the wind, it's to the raccoon. I am a fiery biju. Besides, I told you to find a library a long time ago. Exactly, but it's better not to, it ends badly. The next day I went to look for the library again. The eternal problem. Will I even find her? This time luck turned to face me, not the booty, and I found it. I felt the nature, as it were. And now I stopped at a strange mechanism, a spiral on the wall. Or the entrance, fuck knows. The spiral was made of gold, but terribly worn and covered in cobwebs. Tell me, how did they attach it to the wall, I don't know. Probably, the ninja was welded with a kato, I thought and asked a question to Ku. How do you imagine it? A fool, but it seems logical to me. Think with your brain, with your gray matter. Or do you have snot in the place of your brains? Well, go to the forest, don't ruin my logic. While the fox was grumbling, I tried to open this shit, but the solution came by itself. I pressed myself against a stone and, in order not to break my arm, I glued my chakra to that wall. The spiral creaked and disappeared. How? And, of course, she went down, breaking the floor. Is this how it should be? I looked into the abyss. It's pitch dark. I had to gather my will into a fist and jump. She felt danger in the air and somersaulted through herself, turning into a fox. She fell, thank Kami, on her paws. I smelled a strange smell. Having gone to the front, she clearly went out somewhere. I walked, the smell intensified, it began to lighten. I saw an arch, a light behind it, and when I passed under it, I went blind for a moment. Soon, blinking, I saw a room. Or rather the library. Did I really find her? Yes, baby, I could. I started rummaging through old books and scrolls when I heard a voice. Another relative. I turned my head and saw an old lady. She was wearing an old yellow kimono, and her gray hair was pinned up with a wooden crab. Who are you? I've got a lot of nerve. The old lady smiled and said, my name is this Uzumaki. My jaw greeted the floor. What's your name, child? It became so warm in my heart. Since childhood, everyone hated and feared me. No one helped, I was beaten. No one even considered me a human, they just called me a demon. Tears welled up in my eyes. Only Kurama supported me. Grandma caught herself and ran up to me. What happened? Who offended you? I, wiping tears and snot, told everything. All my life and even about Ku. She was sitting on her knees next to me and stroking my head with a frown. When I finished, she said, I have been living in the world for a long time and I do not understand young people in such actions. Don't worry, I won't hurt you. My sister was also a Jinchuriki, and the old lady began her story. She lived in the hidden whirlpool, a village now defunct, and was the younger sister of Mito Uzumaki, the wife of the valiant first hokage, who built our village. She was 16 years younger than her sister. When she herself turned the same age, the council released Kunoichi to Konoha to her sister, but Uzumaki, who was practically locked inside the walls of the village earlier, decided to travel the world. And it was she who collected this library, collecting all the available information for many years, as well as writing something down on her own. Thus she spent more than 30 years on her travels. Upon returning to the village where Mito still lived, and the quarter of her native clan was still inhabited, she decided to build a library in order to preserve all her works, but when she decided to put up a barrier to protect all the collected knowledge from bad hands and eyes, it so happened that Kunoichi sealed herself. Since that time, she has been forced to live inside the library. However, there were advantages from this. She doesn't age and she doesn't need food, and she also had a huge amount of time to write a bunch of books, to sort out what exactly led to this outcome. Sei didn't know what was going on in the outside world, whether her sister was looking for her or thought she was on the road again. The old lady never got answers to these questions. It was a shock for me to find out that in such a period of time, she did not go crazy, but the relative looked kind and calm, which I liked and made me relax. Later, I printed it with the help of the Uzumaki chakra, on which the contour of the barrier seal was tied. Since it sealed itself, I could freely enter and leave the room. The old lady showed me where and how I needed to help with the seals so that she could get out, and everything happened as it should. Why didn't she do it herself? Sei-sama is a Fuina master, but the barrier is made so that you can't use the chakra inside. And she also said that she would teach me. Now I have a teacher. And a relative. She said I could call her my grandmother. But only if I don't tell anyone about it. Well, okay, it's not hard for me. And I'm not that stupid. Come on. The barrier of the 7 rings. I shouted and folded the seals. It's been many years. I turned 12. During this long time, I studied Fuin hard, trained hard, read scrolls and books. In general, the days were very busy, so much so that I had to sacrifice the time I usually spent with friends to prepare for classes with grandma, because she is a strict teacher, and I constantly do everything at the last moment. But, as they say, it's easy to learn, it's hard in battle. Ugh. Conversely. Well, you get it. Fuin was given to me with painstaking work, a bunch of notched scrolls, liters of blood for seals, hundreds of sheets covered with hieroglyphs, so that they were perfect on a ready-made basis and nothing could prevent the fulfillment of the task. An example of what would happen was before my eyes, the imprisonment of Granny, but despite my diligence, I do not know a third of everything, but what I have learned and can change, as my grandmother says, just a C grade. Uzumaki has it in his blood, they said. They told me a lot of lies. Yes, it's terrible. If Dad was also an Uzumaki, then it wouldn't be so hard for me, but I have to work with what I have. But life is unfair. Whimper whimper. I can't do anything. Well, now about the barrier principle. First you need to lure someone into a prepared trap. It will be different as the control improves. First, the sign blood is applied, and the chakra is poured into it. The second, more complicated one, an object is left there, completely stuffed with chakra, but it is easy to notice even to a genie, so it must be hidden with the help of a technique that I have not studied yet. Further, in both cases, the technique is the same. I lure the enemy there, and when he steps there, I fold the seals and create a barrier. You can create from 2 to 7 barriers at a time. I can create 3. Also at the same time, they are created in a ring around the enemy and begin to shrink. And, death. While I'm trying on Grandma and her walking stick. The cane won. There are successes. He was already on, pause, hurrah for success. 5 centimeters already, I, offended, turned away. That's it, I'm offended. And she's laughing. Okay, I'll feed you, and you'll go to the academy, said the old woman. For almost 5 years, she has not changed her appearance, except that she has aged a little, but it was hardly noticeable. Gray hair, braided in a ponytail, a white t-shirt, and she is wearing a yellow jacket, then a long black skirt. The eyes are closed, so that wrinkles move away from their corners, which are also on the forehead and hands, which is noticeable, and there is a kind smile on the lips. By the way, she still lives in the library. Only now she cooks there and even washes. Ku and I did some repairs there. How? Kurama helped. How? Grandma is a master, so she changed the seal. Now Q can go out of print like a little fox. I took such revenge on him then. I squeezed him until he screamed. They won't believe who I tell. A month later, Grandma found how to make a fox Kurama into a person. She used the seals and an hour later he came out of the closed room. In appearance, 20 years old, red long hair and red eyes, with a vertical pupil. He was dressed in Grandma's flowered kimono. Naturally, I neighed like a horse. We've been doing repairs for a whole month. Now everything is different there. You enter, immediately the library, go to the middle and turn your head sideways. There is an arch, behind it a short corridor from which you exit into a large room. There is a bed right in front of her, a little further from the door, a sink, 3 cabinets and a refrigerator. The room is rectangular. Q's bed is on the left. On the right is a desk. Wallpaper, in bears. Grandma can't work, Kurama is working, a peddler in a cafe. Well, that's all he earned. I live with them. Ku always calls me a freeloader, referring to the fact that I have to live in my house, and I almost always hang out with them, then at my place, but it's boring there. By the way, girls are already looking at QB. Well, what can I say, my life is not boring, something always happens. Then training, then cleaning, then lessons, then Ku decided to take care of my upbringing, namely, he taught me to arrange tea ceremonies or taught me secular manners. Sir, hand me the paper, Please, I'm puffing. Yes, madam, go to the ladies' room, I'm a gentleman, I'll wait. Oh, sir, you're so kind, that's about how we talked for a whole week, until Grandma got tired of it. So the day of distribution has come. Soon I will be assigned to the team and given a mentor. Well, sensei. I will go on assignments, earn money. And very soon I will leave the village. I have good reasons for this. Why should I stay in the village, where I have been persecuted almost since birth? Where I should be a heroine, not a monster, a brat. My father saved the village and was a wonderful hokage. Then why did the top arrange it? For what? I yawned, nearly dislocating my jaw. I came out quite recently. The Ninetail woke me up today. And I'll tell you right away, don't ever wake me up like that. He turned into a terrible samurai with his technique and, laughing madly, poured a bucket of cold water with ice and even live fish on my poor head. And then it's better for you not to know, because Konoha has not heard such a mat. However, the mate was mostly from Ku, for which he received from his grandmother. Muhahaha, a breeze stirs the leaves, birds whistle their melodies softly, somewhere to swear to Biju, beauty in general. And then, next to enjoying nature, 2 hurricanes sweep by me. Purple and pink-red. And they rush by, screaming something. Horror in one word. Hurricanes are running and hiding around the bend. I also hurriedly ran to class. Finally I went to the academy. And right at the entrance to the classroom, my person almost went deaf from the screams of Sasuke-kun. I tapped my head and checked to see if I could hear. I think I hear it. And why do they like him so much? Just a beautiful conceited one. End POV. Naruto the blonde walked into the classroom, Epic jumped on the desk and sat in a pose in front of the Sharinganist. Their eyes crossed, and the children started shooting lightning. A moment, and Naruto is pushed, and she flies at the brunette. There is a fateful contact with her lips, after which they recoiled from each other. Immediately, the female half of the class began to step decisively on the girl with screams and screams. The situation was saved by Irika, who entered the classroom. Naruto sat with a twisted face and spat. The teacher began to announce the commands: first, the second, sixth, team number 7. Sakura Haruno, Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha. Teacher, Hatake Kakashi. He looked at the children. Sasuke is a facepalm, Sakura smiles and chirps something to Sasuke. Naruto is the face of universal loss. Then the announcement of the teams continued. For someone, the distribution was not unexpected. Shikamaru did not even look up from his desk at the composition of his team, and Choji only stopped eating chips for a second. One Ino was indignant that she got into the team of losers, and not to her beloved Sasuke. Hinata sighed sadly when she heard that her friend would not be with her in the team, but remained satisfied with her distribution. But Kiba was somewhat outraged. He did not like the beetle leader and he immediately demanded a redistribution. Irika only said skeptically that the Academy Council made up the teams together with Hokage, guided by the skills of each student. Having fallen silent for a while, the dog breeder began to annoy others. Irika left, and the teenagers remained waiting for their mentors, chattering for the whole class, as well as discussing commands. Naruto loudly whined to her campaign of boys, consisting of Shikamaru, Choji and Kiba, that the fate of being on the same team with them is hell. They will not get along and will break up. Shikamaru lazily reminded me that it was the Hokage. Otherwise, if we don't work together, we will be sent back to the academy, which neither the young genius nor the crammer need, so they will have to put up with each other. An hour later, only team number 7 remained. Naruto, already quite tired of waiting for this mentor, sneakily giggling, put the sponge on the door and left the office. After a couple of minutes, she returned with a bucket, a mop and soap and shampoo, not forgetting to carefully avoid her own trap, and then returning the sponge to its original position. After just a few minutes, the trap was ready. And after 2 hours of fooling around, Sensei finally appeared. He entered, a sponge fell on his head, took a step and slipped. After driving a little, he crashed into a bucket and drove out the window, hanging half out of the frame. Then Naruto kicked him from the inside to accelerate. He fell out of the window and got stuck in a tree with a bucket on his head. After a couple of seconds, the rest of the Team 7 come to the window and look out the window. Uchiha's stifled giggle is heard, Sakura's light laugh and Naruto's loud neigh. My first impression of you is that I don't like you very much. Naruto's POV. After Sensei's Rizakni fall, this scarecrow led us to get acquainted. After that, we went out on the roof, and he invited us to introduce ourselves. I thought about it a little and gave, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I love a lot of things, but mostly it comes down to ramen. I also like to cook and cute little foxes. If anything, don't eat. I don't like a man with one eye and learning. Hobby, to learn killing techniques and design. Well, I did this during the renovation. It seems to me that this is what I do best. When Grandma showed me the layout of the library, I drew a whole bunch of drawings, but we couldn't afford everything. The teacher is looking at me too intently. Something is suspicious. I squinted and looked at the teacher. He didn't show it and phlegmatically nodded his head to Sakura. Her speech contained mostly only pronouns and a couple of verbs with an adverb. But at least one sentence was more than 3 words, and I don't like Naruto and Ino. Well, at least it's mutual. Uchiha pompously said a pompous speech, and the scarecrow let us go, while scaring us that it was better not to eat, otherwise he would vomit. Yeah, right now, I'll just iron my shoelaces. By the way, can you arrange a picnic? And yet, all this time Sensei was reading a book of obscene content. How I found out, it's better for you not to know. Inspired by thoughts of a picnic, I said goodbye and went to collect coins. Now I have to live at home. And suddenly I'll make friends with Sakura. Although, it's more likely that something big will die in the forest, and I don't need it. Having come to the library and opened all the seals at the entrance, I went to talk about the team, the trap and the stupid sensei. I attacked the wrong one. If I wasn't Uzumaki Naruto. There are many more beautiful things waiting for you. Buhahashan. I also decided to take something for training. Well, that test. So with paints, homemade bombs with paint, a couple of shoes with a very interesting property, and I also sealed sun loungers, an umbrella and a ball. Well, and kunai with shurikens. So with I'm also going to make cocktails and dangos. Fortunately, my grandmother taught me how to cook. Surely my classmates will listen to a stupid provocation. And I'm smart, I'm good. Thanks to kurama. Later, I threw food and drinks into the print on my wrists. These are the elementary seals of my clan. Some of the easiest, well, hold on Konoha. I'm going to be a ninja. I woke up because of Biju, who had brazenly overslept and was rushing around the house in a hopeless search for something. Grumbling, she moved to the bathroom. Stop. I got it. Everything starts with Kurama and me at the same time. He has to go to work at 5 in the morning, and I, according to Sensei, too, only for training. But I'm a buka, I'll come to 9. Anyway, the scarecrow will appear late. Although, a picnic. Okay, when I get ready, then I'll go. After doing the morning chores and checking the seals, I reprinted everything. Then again, in the end everything was sealed by my grandmother. After checking everything, I set off. The polygon met me with an angry painted screeching Sakura and Sasuke, over which leaden clouds were gathering. To be honest, I greeted them and went to look for a clearing through the ore of a stupid teammate. I found the clearing quickly and, having settled down, began to print everything out. For several people, by the way. She put down her umbrella, opened the chaise longue, took out a strawberry cocktail and dango. I look at the reaction of my teammates. One opened her mouth and blinked, and poked her finger. The second one burns with a look. And what? And nothing. I'm lying down, sipping a drink and snacking on dango. Sakura woke up, yelled, and I offered to join. She grumbled, took a cocktail and now sips through a straw. Uchiha stands proudly and does not look in our direction. It hurts, actually. It's time for me to think about it. On one fuin, but with the ability of Kitsune, you won't get far. I give 1,000 ri that even with today's barriers, a cloud of little, used iron, with a course of survival in the forest and with a simple tie, they will roll out a beautiful pancake all over the polygon. The worst thing is uncertainty. Will I be able to pass this test? Even with inattention and unpunctuality, he is a jonin, and jonin is given for beautiful eyes only by Uchiha. Speaking of gophers, I have been worried about one question for a long time. Why do almost all the girls hang themselves on him? And even I'm a little attracted to him. I do not deny that he is handsome, smart and the heir of the clan. But, holy hedgehogs! I got it. He is the last heir of the clan, in fact, already the head. I don't take Itachi into account, he's a traitor. Well, now I'll explain what came up. The fact is that once my grandmother told me about clans. She used the example of, I think, Senju Tsunade. She is the last descendant of the clan, therefore the head. Grandmother once mentioned about the initiation ceremony of the heads of clans. The process itself was not told, but the consequences. The fact is that if the head is not married or does not have a stable partner, then he begins to pull a smell that attracts the opposite sex. But only those women are affected to whom the head has a genetic predisposition. That's the answer. Stop. That is, I also have a predisposition to the Uchihanate gopher? No, no, no. We don't need such happiness. I'd rather stay like Tsunade, a socialite. And it's too early to think about it yet, it's still small. Here, by the age of 16, you can think about it. A rustle brought me out of my reverie. Probably the scarecrow came. Oh my God. I think that in the land of lightning, birds began to fall from the sky, and it's just Kakashi showed up. Hey. Sensei, you're late. Sorry, guys. A black cat ran across the road, I had to go around. Well, now to the point, he pulled out an alarm clock and set it at 3 low posts. The alarm clock is set for noon. During this time, you must take away these bells from me. But sensei. There are only 2 of them. That's right, Sakura. One person will be left without a bell and will get back to the academy. He kept talking, but I wasn't listening. It's going to be a difficult choice. Either I pass, although it's not a fact, because he's a jonin, revealing myself, or I don't pass, I stay for the 2nd year and continue to live without revealing my true essence. I got ready and started listening to the words. Sensei waved his hand and shouted, "Let's get started." I quickly jumped into the bushes. To begin with, we need to come up with a plan in which I and, possibly, someone from my team will pass. Although, I'm a fool. How many teams have I seen? There are 3 people there. Ugh. 4, together with Jonin Mentor. So it's all a lie. Damn it. All around is deception and complete fraud. Then everything is much easier and more complicated. He may not take us, unless it's a direct order from the Hokage. Well, that's unlikely. Who needs them? So we have to please him. But how? By what criteria does he choose his subordinates? This is the essence of the question. A test, 2 bells, 3 genins. Precisely. He wants to intimidate us. So, it's time to establish relations with the team. After all, it turns out that this is a test for teamwork. Mdaya. The arrogant genius of the red-eyed, the glamorous fool in love, well, not really, but only the knowledge of the academy, and me. Not much. I must think. I wonder if there are ticks in this forest. We're here without hats and repellent. Well, that's why nobody cares about security. For some reason, I don't want to die from blood poisoning of a scarlet tick, without having reached Chunin. And then suddenly on a tree, or in the bushes, or in the grass. This is worse than Ibiki's torture. About Kami, what I'm thinking, it was with such thoughts that I made my way through the forest after the cat. To be honest, I don't like this mission anymore. We have to catch the cat running away for the devil knows how many times. Although I feel good. I can smell him. But the cat is smart, rolled in water mint by the stream. Yes, and I recently discovered a sensor in myself. This is a rather rare gift from Uzumaki, but apparently there is one sensor in my pedigree. Being a sensor is not like Hughes, a review is almost like Owl's, but finding a target by volume, smell, kinship, chakra. On this issue, only the grandmother is an assistant, and even then only at the level of Chunin. Grandma can recognize me or Ku by a familiar chakra, but her perception area is very small. But back to the cat. This cat is nimble, smart and quirky. You can't catch him so easily with a hangover. Perch, it's carp, do you hear? The target is found. Naruko. What kind of perch? Hush, Sakura, don't yell at the whole forest. Oh. You're probably surprised to see me with the original team. Then, during the trial, I decided to act as usual, that is, as problems arise. Therefore, I hid, threw iron at Sensei and, thanks to the fox's hearing and nose, I got away from a couple of traps. And tripped over Sakura, a bag of potatoes lying in the bushes. Sakura came to her senses and started asking me about the wounded Sasuke. And I told her that I tripped over her when I was running through the woods. Then I started thinking out loud about there are always 3 genins in the team. And soon we decided to look for Sasuke and unite in a cohesive team, or as it turns out. But the alarm clock rang, scaring me to hiccups. Sensei chatted for a long time, and then tied Sakura to a pole. And I, a kind soul, quickly ate half of lunch, shared with Sakura. Sasuke did the same. And then Sensei jumped out. Almost everything, ahem. But we passed, and that's the main thing. Take care. I shouted and jumped over the ready opponent. The cat, belligerently bristling its fur and showing snow-white fangs, darted to the bushes. But Uchiha jumped out of them not very timely, and for this he was knocked down by me running after the cat. The cat, jumping over the fallen us, reached the bushes, but Sakura ran out of the ambush, scaring him. Probably, the teammate fell, because a branch got stuck in her pink hair, and because of this Sakura resembled a goat. Or a deer. At this time, we successfully resolved the situation. I slapped the Uchiha on the back of the head and attacked the cat, which Kondreti almost missed. Gently stroking him, I turned at the sound of footsteps. Sensei came out of the bushes and scratched his head, looking at us. Almost swearing Sasuke, Sakura deer and I, innocence itself with a purring cat. Animals love me. I wanted to talk to him, find out what he can't sit, but you can't chat in public. For about a month we have been going through stupid tasks of the lowest rank. Weed, clean, bring, take out. Ugh. I feel like a servant, but so far only this way. Teamwork has more or less improved. Sakura and I found a common cause. She started going to the library quite often. Did you take an example from a scarecrow? But the point is that we ran into each other there. I didn't have access to the library before, and I didn't really need to. But now it became necessary. In one department, there were low-rank technicians donated by Shinobi. The lightest. The scrolls were painted, torn and covered with obscene inscriptions, and it was very difficult to learn from them, but it was impossible to take out. There is a seal there, well, that's it. While looking at another scroll, I was caught by my teammate. She took mostly snotty novels and books on plants there. I didn't ask which ones. She was surprised and asked why I was here. To which I, not wanting to reveal myself, grabbed the first book I came across, showed it to her. It turned out to be a book on herbology. And she suddenly smiled, chirped something about Ino, who doesn't understand anything about flowers, although her family runs a flower shop. Well, okay. Sakura decided to go to Irianini. How she came to such a conclusion, I did not ask. After listening to her and drawing my own conclusions, I decided that it would still be useful to me. With my amount of chakra, stamina and good control, I can become a good medic. Therefore, when she heard that she was going to the Irianin courses at the hospital, she asked when and if it was paid. She, of course, said that nothing would work out for me, but I pathetically told her my plans and that I would become Hokage, and it still worked out. Classes are held every day from 4 to 7. 3 whole hours, damn it. But it's worth it. I'll look around a couple of times, I'll take a look. If the teachers are good, I will continue to go. What if there are those who don't want to teach me because of the fox? But I firmly decided that I would go. As a last resort, my grandmother will pull me up, and I already know the herbs, because they taught me in the forest, and now I have already attended one class and decided to go further. Botanmaru's teacher was an old man from some half-forgotten clan. He's about 80 years old. And how did you live to such an age? I don't understand at all. But he didn't teach well, he stood at the blackboard and mumbled something under his breath. I had to sit very close and take notes. As I understand it, first theory, then practice with Aiko Namazu. She's an intern. Only she became a chunin. She's about 15, I think. But the fact that she became a B-rank Iron at that age is very impressive, but I will surpass her. The word shinobi, yes, Irika pronounced the verdict when he saw us. But there are no losses, no injuries. There is only a violated dignity. I stood in the middle of our merry trio and smiled, Baldia from the high purring of the cat. I don't want to give it away. You can squeeze him. Of course, I can cuddle Kurama, but a fox can be offended, or even swear. The task is completed, the most adequate of us, Sasuke, said gloomily. Although he is also turned on revenge. But there must be at least someone. Yes, I'm sick of these stupid tasks. Are we ninjas or peasants? Sakura and I shouted, we feel like servants. Sakura announced, but quickly fell silent, because Uchiha was emitting a terrifying thirst for blood, and heavy thunderclouds were hovering over his head. Call Uchiha a servant? Well, Sakura, well done. Irika left our rather loud aura and indignation with a lecture. But he was not destined to tell us off any further. A very big lady burst into the room, snatched the cat out of my hands and began to squeeze, hug and kiss. Now I understand why he ran away. After a while, the woman handed over the required amount and hurriedly left, not forgetting to thank and say goodbye. Soon we resumed the disturbances and still beat out a C-rank mission from this greedy man, that is, already quite serious. But when I saw the customer, I realized that Irika had taken a sophisticated revenge on us. The customer was a guy in his late 40s, a drunk with a bottle and a straw hat named Tazuna. I didn't like him right away, and this Tazuna, after examining us, called all the kids, and I was also small. I'm not small, but petite. I even wanted to beat him, but sensei stopped me. And so I wanted to fry it too. Sasuke needs to ask. The scarecrow kindly asked us to pack everything we needed and come to the gate at 6. Naturally, I'll be there by 10. Or by 11, we need to think about it. But it was necessary to think not only about this, but also about what needed to be taken. Yes, it is necessary to prepare, to bribe the iron. I wish I had a blacksmith shop. Oh, dreams. But more seals are needed. And I also found such a scroll in the library. I'm sorry, but I'll steal it. Well, what about it? It is covered with writing, and at other times I had to steal. It's not always possible to buy something. As a child, I was either charged twice or even 3 times more, and more often they just threw me out of the shop. I had to get out somehow. But now they can't refuse. I am a full-fledged shinobi, and to refuse a shinobi is to offend. What to take, what to take. First of all, a change of clothes, a first aid kit, a few poisons. And what? They will come in handy for sure. More seals and a hiking kit. It costs a lot. It consists of a tent and a sleeping bag. You can buy the rest yourself. And why such a price? I'll buy more ramen. Ramen. I'm going to build a temple to worship ramen. And the god will be Tucci. After saying goodbye to the team, I went to collect and buy all of the above. The main thing is not to forget the matches. Although why? There is Uchiha. Let him work hard. Yes, we should also start mastering our element. And what kind of techniques are there? That's what I should find out. Preparations were in full swing. I raised my grandmother, kurama, and even the forest animals, and in the shortest possible time was collected as if for war. However, they didn't find any armor, which makes me very happy. Even though I know they're worried, it's still too much. 6 scrolls. And that's just provisions. 2 more, clothes for all occasions, from a swimsuit to a waterproof raincoat and a respirator, as if I'm going to the rain village. 3 more scrolls with iron and 3 with poisons, herbs, also for all occasions. And a bunch of all kinds of seals, from simple heating of water to hiding the chakra and others. Kurama has also gone to print, but he can't get further than 5 kilometers away from me. Before that, an educational conversation was held, and now Ku is obliged to report on the mental connection with his grandmother. Everything would be fine, but everything is through me. I had to say that I couldn't carry it all away, but Grandma decided to make a workout out of it. Dragging a bunch of things to the land of waves is much worse than the courses of the Irenans. By the way, there are no special advances in this field yet, unlike Sakura. It seems to be her calling. She already knows the mystical hand and has learned the whole textbook of herbs and poisons. Good thing it's not like me. It is clear that nothing is clear. I said enthusiastically, probably happily twinkling my eyes. Because of the upcoming one, the real one. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, but I still felt cheerful, unlike my teammates who came on time. I also met Sensei along the way, and we talked a little. After all, Hatake Kakashi is an adult shinobi, and this is a mission, so I asked him about everything related to the task. After evaluating my things, he said that he was going to the store, and since he met me, he would help. And we were sitting, deciding what to take with us. I had to get out of it and say that I had stocked up for the whole team. After nodding, Sensei left me 3 scrolls of provisions, 1 of herbs, and told me to divide 2 scrolls of poisons among themselves. Help to select clothes. And I wondered where it all came from. She said that the hair brought it, then we said goodbye, and I brought half of all the things into the apartment, and dragged the rest of the selected items to the gathering place, and already there, together with Sakura, we shared everything. Sasuke only came up later, and we solemnly handed him some poisons, antidotes, and a first aid kit. And what will we do if we are attacked? We will fight back, of course, and if the collapse? In the land of waves, what if, Sensei showed up an hour later. During this time, I asked so many questions that even my head was swollen. I terrorized everyone. I learned what to do in case of landslides, hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, and where to go in case of anything. Only I still didn't understand why the forest that we set off at the wrong time, but I didn't care much about it. We didn't walk fast, but we didn't crawl like turtles either. Unlike us, Sensei could probably run to the pier in half an hour, but the customer and we could not run fast and jump up trees like squirrels. Maybe I could, but it could have gone sideways for me. While Sakura was chirping something to Sasuke, while Sensei was reading and the customer was drinking, I noticed the peculiarities of flora and fauna. From the outside it seemed that I was just picking flowers and enjoying life, but in fact I was collecting valuable herbs and communicating with animals. The birds agreed to warn from the air, they could see perfectly well. The rodents began to check the ground. In general, we are surrounded by animals from all sides. I also found such a cute animal, a weasel. I didn't know we had them. I even decided to show it to the team. Only Sakura shared my delight. We didn't walk that long, but during that time I managed to get bored. Until now, I have diligently assumed the appearance of a cheerful idiot, ignoring Sakura's chatter. And how can she talk about Sasuke for so long? He himself walked on the machine not far from the customer. When I was completely relaxed, suddenly a pebble came back under my feet, and I almost plowed the ground with my nose, but for some reason stopped centimeters from the ground. Turning my head and seeing Sasuke holding me by the backpack, I took a little fright, but immediately turned around, said thank you and went on as if nothing had happened. But I stepped into some kind of puddle, from which a hand reached out and grabbed my ankle. With a sharp squeal, I jerked, drove the face out of the puddle in the face and jumped back. A ninja flew out of there, tied Sensei with chains and with the help of strange gloves, crushed. Pieces of Kakashi fell to the ground. 2 seconds later, they rushed at me. Thoughts raced through my head and the most successful was the one where I had to dodge, throw a star and give Sasuke his finest hour, who was already rushing towards me. After completing everything and rolling away, I got up and saw that my teammate had nailed them to a tree. The ninjas suddenly released the chains that were tied to each other and separated. One rushed to the customer, who was covered by Sakura, and the second, to me. I braced myself and shot a glance at Sasuke. We nodded to each other, and he left for Sakura. When the enemy was already close, and I was preparing to print a scroll with iron, Sensei appeared and saved everyone. Well, except, perhaps, ninja blockheads. When everything had calmed down and the bound losers were dozing at the tree, we began to run into the drunk a little. He confessed that he didn't have the money to pay for a higher-ranked mission because the village was poor and all the funds were going to build a bridge. We conferred and decided to continue the mission for now. Fortunately, no one was injured, but Sakura still touched Sasuke's hand, checking for scratches. We continued on our way, and I kept reproaching myself for inattention, which could cost me the rest of my life. Sensei noticed my slightly depressed state and suddenly praised everyone, telling and showing our shortcomings. This cheered me up a little, and I was already walking more joyfully, almost keeping up with Sakura. I pulled a flower out of my favorite orange jacket and gave it to her, asking what it was. It looks like a daisy. Are daisies blue? Well, they are different. Sasuke-kun. Look what a flower. Does he only communicate with interjections? I whispered to Sakura, for which I received a slap on the head. It looks like the subject of the conversation heard us and threw a glance at me. I tried not to pay attention to it, blurting out the girl so that she would tell me about how other teams work. Nevertheless, I managed it, and I found out that everyone trains and goes on normal missions. I immediately started glaring at Sensei, and he turned his head. Now I was bothering him with requests for training and techniques. He said that as soon as we arrive in the land of waves, he will definitely teach us all the coolest shinobi techniques in the whole world. The harbor greeted us with an almost deathly silence. We hired a boat and the man who drove it, and sailed out. I sat at the very bow of the boat and peered ahead to no avail, but a thick fog prevented me. Giving up trying, I sniffed. What a fog. I can't see anything. Sakura said worriedly, there will be a bridge soon. The boatman broke the silence. We are being carried right into the land of waves. An unfinished bridge appeared in the distance. There were a lot of materials on it, different designs, even a crane was visible. Wow. Huge. I shouted, cupping my palms together. Quiet, I told you not to make noise. Why do you think we're paddling with the engine off? So as not to attract attention, so that we would not be noticed. However, I hardly listened further, plunging into a conversation with Kurama. It was dangerous. Naruto, you have to be careful. Well, the shuriken is clear. I was just pissed off by Uchiha. You know, I've noticed that you've been thinking about him all the time lately. What? Are you really going to be like this pig-colored thing soon, happily squeaking in front of him and drooling? That's what's the matter. That explains why Gato wants you out. What? Which Gato? Who to remove? What happened? Have I listened to everything again? In other words, those we met in the forest are Gato's mercenaries, Sasuke said. Soon the old man began to press for pity. It turns out that he has a daughter and a grandson. I wonder if he's my age. I was so attracted by these thoughts that I didn't even notice how we arrived. Getting out of the boat, I stumbled and almost crashed, but Sakura caught me, for which I thanked her, but words were not enough for me, and all the way to the old man's house I wove a wreath of various flowers growing nearby, sometimes wandering so far that Sensei had to call out to me. But in the end I finished my work and proudly put a wreath on Sakura's head. She looked confused and took a long time to get to Sasuke, asking if he suited her, and all of us, the three genins, missed the moment when we were attacked. I almost had my head blown off by an incomprehensible bandura. Well, at least Kurama managed to warn me. Sensei ordered us to lie down, and Sasuke pushed the frightened Sakura onto the dusty road. Oh, I feel how long she will grumble that she is now all dirty. If only we survive. Naruto, don't try to join the fight. This is Zabuza. The voice of the fox thundered in my skull. What's wrong with him? Just a shinobi with a bandaged face and a giant knife. What's wrong? Grr. Don't argue, it's not the time. I'll explain later. Better watch the battle, it hasn't started yet. Maybe it will do? I don't think so. While our mental conversation was going on, Zabuza and Sensei were talking about something. Having died, I began to carefully reach for the pouch to take one of the kunai, which I smeared with paralyzing poison back in the village. It seems that this bandit did not take into account the three genins, and I was able to take a weapon without consequences for my health. And just in time, the battle broke out. Our team stood on different sides of the customer while Kakashi-sensei exchanged blows with Zabuza. the battle of two strong shinobi was fascinating. I was constantly following their fast movements. Dangerous beauty. While the fight was on an equal footing, I wasn't particularly worried. But when Sensei started to give up after using Sharingan, where did he get it from, and after he was completely imprisoned in a water prison, I realized that this was the end. We stood up for the defense of the customer, but Sensei immediately shouted that we should get away with the builder as soon as possible, if our lives are dear to us. His voice was drowned out by the water column, which completely enveloped Kakashi in a disorderly vortex. He looked tired and even surrendered, and yet I was sure that he was ready to sacrifice himself for our salvation. It seemed to me that Sakura, if given the go-ahead, would run away. She clutched the kunai convulsively and shifted her frightened gaze from Sensei to the opponent. Sasuke, though he looked scared, but he did well. But something still puzzled him. He was frowning and even more thoughtful than usual. My head was in a complete mess. Panic was coming over me more and more, thoughts were swarming madly, which even drowned out the voice of my Biju. How so? On the very first task of rank C, they are trying to kill us. This is not how I imagined the shinobi world. Of course, I didn't think that we would all be knitting, but is it so dangerous? And why do I want to escape from this Zabuza so much? His look, his aura. I'm scared. For the first time inhumanly scary. Naruto, calm down. This Kakashi of yours will be able to buy time, and will slip away. In extreme cases, you can hide, as the animals taught you. If the matter takes an even more serious turn, then you can use the scroll to teleport to Konoha. What? How can I leave my team now? If the outcome of the mission depends on my actions? And if their lives? No. I can't just give up. If I retreat now, how can I escape from the village? How can I live outside it? That won't do. I took a few steps forward and said gloomily, Sensei, didn't you tell us that those who don't complete tasks are trash? And those who abandon their comrades are even worse than garbage. Kakashi-sensei, we won't leave you. Zabuza smiled grimly. It seems my speech did not impress him too much. As if it didn't come out sideways for me. I was especially wary when he began to rapidly fold the seals. A couple of seconds, and now a clone of Nuke-Nin appeared out of the water. The clone looked natural, but I doubted its effectiveness and efficiency. Still, the shadow ones are a more reliable option, albeit a chakra-consuming one. Zabuza himself took a more relaxed pose and began to speak. Do you think if you put on a blindfold, then immediately, shinobi? When you've been between life and death so many times, you won't care. Then you can be called shinobi. When you become more dangerous to me, then you will earn this title. And calling shinobi upstarts like you is just hilarious. Now the clone began to act. He folded the seals and disappeared into the fog, which hid me from the team. There was only an impenetrable white shroud around. Through it, I could hear the voices of Sasuke and Sakura, who were excitedly calling me. I could take off my hat now, it would provide me with animal hearing, but if the fog technique dissipates, then I will be discovered, which will cast doubt on my further stay in the village. But even the fox ears hidden under the cloth picked up more sounds than human ears could. The nose was working at full speed, but the fog was very much in the way, the dampness drowned out many smells. However, the clone was in no hurry to attack. Only an impenetrable fog reigned around. I did not move from my place, looking warily in different directions and listening for the slightest rustle. I was strained by the fine trembling of the fog ahead, and my gaze managed to catch the shinobi approaching at lightning speed. But everything happened so unexpectedly and quickly that avoiding the attack was out of the question. The levels of our training and experience were not comparable. A second before the blow, I slightly deviated to the side, but I could not completely avoid the attack. Nuke-Nin knocked off my bandage with his foot and stepped on it, towering over me. From the blow to the pumpkin, I was disoriented for a few moments. Shinobi swung again. This time I was saved by Sasuke, who was hit harder than me. The blow landed on the stomach with the handle, so much so that the guy gushed blood from his mouth. I froze in fright. Sasuke collapsed next to me, and my hands lifted his head to his knees by themselves, and unbidden tears gushed from his eyes. I lifted Sasuke and guessed to hide in Shunshin closer to Sakura. Zabuza reacted neutrally. Further beating of kittens did not appeal to him. Catching his warning look, I concluded that the subsequent blows would be fatal. After that, Nuke-Nin was generous with a short but terrifying story about his life. A short moral: do not go, children, to walk in Kirigakura, you will have to kill classmates. While Zabuza was conducting his monologue, my brain in a critical situation gave me an idea that could work. I told Sakura to continue protecting the customer, and she whispered the plan in Sasuke's ear. In part, I was sure that Nuke-Nin would not expect resistance from us, and he would not worry about stupid genins, so I counted on the element of surprise. According to the plan, Sasuke took out a huge shuriken and threw it. The weapon flew around the clone in a wide arc and almost reached the real Zabuza, but he easily caught it with his free hand. Then he noticed a shadow shuriken, which was flying under the real one, but he was able to avoid that too. He ducked, and it flew without even touching a hair on the top of his head. The shuriken flew off further, and then the main highlight of my idea came to life. All this time, I was the shadow weapon and, having reached a sufficient distance from the real Zabuza, I turned from the shuriken back into my body and sent a bunch of kunai to the enemy. Nuke-Nin, though he did not expect such meanness from genins, but years of battles hardened his reflexes and he successfully dodged again, but at the cost of losing control of the technique. Kakashi-sensei was released from the water prison. Then, to soften the fall, I had to plop into the water, swim away and quietly return to the team while the teacher is fighting with Zabuza. During the flight, I managed to notice that Zabuza intended to throw the real Sasuke folding shuriken at me in retaliation, but Sensei reacted instantly. He blocked the blow with his hand. Seconds later, I fell into the water. A battle broke out between the shinobi again. I was floundering in the water, swinging my legs. From the shinobi techniques on the lake, the most real waves were created, which overwhelmed me with my head. Having swallowed enough water, I tried to grab the nearest branches, stones, yes, for anything. The teacher has completed the seals for the latest whirlpool technique. Because of this, the water just rebelled. I was thrown in different directions. I stayed underwater for a long time, losing oxygen. At one of these moments, I was hit hard on the bottom, and I lost consciousness. The first thing that greeted me when I woke up was a pain in my body, especially in my head. It ached noticeably. I wanted to react very vividly, as I once taught Biju on my head, with loud curses, but instead only an inarticulate wheeze escaped from behind my mouth. This eloquent sound, right, and screaming, "Hey! I'm having a hard time here, and I just came to my senses," reacted someone who was nearby, who, in the apparent silence of the night, as cicadas chirped, and in general it was too quiet for the day, rustled loudly. After a couple of moments, a face appeared to my gaze, dimly illuminated by moonlight coming from somewhere to the side, from a window or door. It was Sasuke. His black hair was disheveled, and his clothes were crumpled, but his eyes were clear. He did not sleep. Thanks to the moon, I was able to witness in detail his pale face at that moment, and it was definitely beautiful. And frowning. The brunette reached out to me with his hand and took a rag from his forehead, lazily got up, threw back the blanket and left. During the time that I will spend, obviously, waiting, you can strain your brain and think, and where am I actually? And how did I end up here? And why the hell is he sleeping in the same room with me? There were answers to all these questions, but they just left with a rag. Yeah. We will have to resurrect past events in our memory. I remember, we went on a mission, I remember, we sailed on a boat, I remember, we met two ninjas. Then it is very vague. And is it in that order? Maybe we swam first, then fought, or did we fight twice? Oh, and from this in more detail. Yes, the bandaged dude that Kakashi-sensei imprisoned. Then our plan with Sasuke and... That's it. Oh, but I fucked my head. That's bad luck. So I will lie in bed for the whole mission, because few people will believe in my rapid regeneration. Tomorrow, or maybe even today, nothing will hurt anymore. The floorboards creaked, announcing the return of the teammate, but not alone, but with a wet rag that was returned to its place. He himself stared at me, looked at me intently, while I also looked back, only through, trying to bring my thoughts into a stable order. He rustled and moved closer, and I was able to voice a stupid, but necessary thing. What time is it now? Sasuke moved a little and looked away, remembering, probably, 2-3 nights, the brunette replied softly and added. Speak softly, everyone has been asleep for a long time, and who are all these? I replied in a whisper. Yes, apparently so quietly that Sasuke frowned and leaned closer. I repeated a little louder, who is everyone? We were sheltered by the customer's family. So our whole team is here, including 3 more, Tazuna-san, his daughter and grandson. He yawned, covering his mouth with his fist, and spoke again without waiting for me. How are you feeling? It's fine, only my head hurts. I didn't mention the ache in my body, maybe I'll stay in bed less. I'm worried that you're sleeping in the same room with me, not Sakura, even though we're both girls and... Sasuke didn't let me finish, shushed me and asked me to speak more quietly, but quickly answered, we've been here for a couple of days, you woke up for a while, and then immediately fell back to sleep. You didn't have any wounds, except for an abrasion on your head and a couple of bruises, and why such a reaction is unclear. This morning, if she hadn't recovered now, the customer's daughter wanted to go for a local doctor. We took turns on duty near your bed, last night Sakura, this one, me. From tomorrow, I think we will sleep properly. Uchiha turned his gaze to the window and seemed to be thinking about something. The light fell on his hair so that it seemed that they were silvering and shimmering. For a moment, it seemed to me that he was leaning towards me again, but the obsession quickly disappeared as soon as Sasuke sighed loudly and broke the silence. If you don't want to drink or anything, I would go to bed. Tomorrow we have to guard Tazuna-san during construction. We need to have a good rest. It's all right. I was slightly embarrassed by such a kind of care and took the cloth off my forehead, since it had already managed to heat up, and put it away from the futon on which I was lying, somewhere to the left. Turning back to Sasuke, to the right, I noticed that he was already settled on his futon, covered with a blanket, and turned away from me. I don't know why, I suddenly blurted out, "Good night." And then she turned to the left herself, finding the patterns on the rag much more entertaining than someone's dark crown. That's the end of it.